All right, folks out there in internet land. Hope you're doing well today. If you haven't yet submitted your take home exam and your character analysis, I would appreciate if you would do that. If you are not able to upload those when we have a packet switch, uh, when we come back from spring break, that would be a great time to do that as well. We're going to go on uh, because we have really no idea how long all this stuff's going to last, and it is. We're going to go into developmental uh, psychology a little bit, and so we're going to start today with looking at IQ test. What I would like for you to do, and it's on that Google Doc on the homepage on Canvas, is to go to iqtest.com. iqtest.com will let you take a free IQ test. You're going to have to put your email in because they email you the results, and we'll talk a little bit about what you might see here in a minute. And do not pay for anything they'll ask if you want special reports and things like that. You don't need to. We just want the number to give you an idea of what your IQ might be. So we're going to take a look. Going to show you here this good-looking fellow there on the right with the awesome facial hairs, a guy by the name of Alfred Binet. Alfred Binet was a Frenchman. He worked at a place called the Sorbonne, which is the University of Paris. It is not what you get if you sit on a bicycle too long. Hashtag dad joke. And basically, the government of France came to Dr. Binet. They wanted to do universal education like the United States was doing, wanted to have an opportunity for all their citizens to go to school, but they didn't want to educate or basically waste money on people that weren't going to be able to learn. So they asked Dr. Binet to design a test to basically quantify academic ability or the ability to learn. And so he did. He came up with a test and then this idea of an intelligence quotient, what today we know as IQ. And IQ is a mix of a lot of different things. You take a person's physical age, their mental age, you divide it out. There's a whole big formula. Basically, though, on his scale, the average IQ is 100. And so as you start to take your IQ test, that's what 70% of people or so are going to score is somewhere between 85 and a 115. Stanford University is going to come along behind that and say, hey, we're going to concentrate a little more on the upper part of the intelligence scale. And so as they do that, the test becomes the Stanford Binet intelligence test. Very standard today. You've taken one before. A lot of times they'll attach it to like the I-step test when you're a kid, things like that. It does a pretty nice job of showing what your performance in certain jobs might be and predicting your future income when you can take one of those. I got a picture here for you of a bell curve. Don't anybody get too alarmed if you've got like statistics PTSD or something like that. This is just the way a normal IQ scale is going to go. Bell curves are just a way of understanding statistics. If you take a look, you can see that most people are going to fall into that 85 to 115 range. If you fall outside of that from 70 to 130, statistics tell us about 98% of people will fall into that. You get much below 70, it's a it's an intellectual disability, and if you get above 145, it's considered to be a genius level IQ. If you get there, there's an organization called Mensa. You actually have to take an IQ test. I think you only have to have about a 135 to get into Mensa, but you can join a club for um, people with high IQs. If that'd be something you're interested in. But this is kind of how it's distributed. So, like I said, you take that test. Uh, it's a time test. So you want to make sure that you're moving as quickly as you can. Don't get things wrong because you're moving so quickly. But there's a timed element to it as well. Now, that is going to be what's called a standardized test. Reason we use standardized tests a lot, except for maybe this year in the state of Indiana, is the idea that we want to be able to test a whole big bunch of people at the same time. So you guys have taken the iLearn, the iStep, PSATs, SATs. Those are all forms of standardized tests, and the big advantage is you can compare people across the country, across the world. You can give a test that is going to be very um, very wide ranging. Problem with it is that some people aren't good test takers. Some people aren't going to be able to perform their best on the test, so you may get some lower scores that don't necessarily indicate academic ability. It could just be nervousness, something like that. You've also got people like Aunt Becky that try to get around the intelligence test, the SAT, things like that, and she's in all kinds of trouble. So um, the also problem is, how do you make them fair? You got to be very careful about bias, things like that. If you actually wanted to make some money in psychology, one of the best ways to do that is to learn how to design tests. And if you can make up the questions for those tests, then it can be pretty lucrative for you. But the problem is, how do you make it to where it's not biased from gender groups, ethnic groups, things like that. And a lot of times that's why those tests can seem a little dull when you're taking them. When you're writing test questions, two things you want to ask yourself. One is the question valid? And that just simply means, does it measure what it's supposed to measure? I'm sure we've all had the experience of being in classes where a teacher has given you a test, and maybe there's a question or two on the test that you don't know, you haven't gone over. You know how frustrating that can be if it's something that you haven't been taught, but now you're being tested on it. That's not a uh, valid measurement of your learning. And so validity just means, yeah, this question is doing, or this task is doing what it's supposed to be doing. The other question that you ask yourself is it reliable? Is it going to last over time? So is it something where you don't want to be rewriting questions for the SAT every month when you give it? You want to be able to use those questions over a number of test cycles. And so is this something that will be reliable over time? And so a lot of times when you're looking at things like that, you don't want to ask questions related to current events, things like that, because obviously it could some of those things could change very quickly. But if a measure is reliable, it will it will hold up over time. I mentioned the SAT a couple times. That's a very reliable measurement of future success in college. Maybe not for everybody, but for most folks, that's a pretty good indicator of your preparation for it. So what we're going to have you do is take the IQ test that's there, and once you do, get that score, and that'll be something that you'll communicate back to me. You don't have to communicate it to anybody else, but we'll work out a way for you to fill that out. And just as a little proof that you did that, tomorrow we're going to take a look at a different intelligence test, something called multiple intelligences. And I'll walk you through that tomorrow. So, hope you guys are having a great day, and that you're not going too stir crazy with all this stuff that's going on. And we'll talk to you soon.